AI doesn't have wisdom, doesn't have that years of experience, and it will always come down to the surveyor at the end of the day. And AI is the tool that can help them get to it faster. It can give more data, but at the end of the day, that data still needs to be interpreted.
That is Nina Young, CEO of Surveyors UK and long-time advocate for practical, real-world AI in surveying. She completely reframes the AI conversation to be not as a threat to professional judgment, but as an enabler that still depends entirely on surveyors' expertise.
You free up time, you have more time for the calls, or having a better customer experience, client experience and interaction. It frees up time to do other things.
She believes that the right use of AI creates space for what matters most: better advice, stronger relationships, and more time for surveyors to apply their insight where it has the greatest impact.
The more you understand AI, the less you fear it.
Today, we explore how fear around AI often disappears once surveyors truly understand how it fits into their workflow. By the end of this conversation, you will learn how AI can support professional judgment, improve client experience, and ultimately help surveyors stay ahead without losing the human side of the profession. I'm Louis Blaxill, and this is the Surveying Shift.
We're at a juncture now where everyone is sitting up and paying attention to AI, and that ranges from the surveyors who are working on their own. We've had customers come to us and say, "What are you doing in this space?" All the way up to the RICS, of course, that released their AI standards. So I thought that's probably as good a place as any to start. It'd be interesting to get your key takeaways and reflections on the AI standards. From my side, it's great that they have responded to people using AI, because I think it's important they did and they took a step. I think we both probably agree there is more to be done, and there are further iterations. I don't think there's anyone at RICS that would debate that. But yeah, it'd be interesting to get your key takeaways in a soundbite and potential areas that they might need to expand further.
It's good. I'm glad it finally is coming out, and I think it gets published fully enforced. Is it March? I think it's March 2026.
Yeah.
But I think for me, there's been a mixed response to it. But what it's obviously very good for is, it's a standard, it's a framework, it's a guide, it's providing the guardrails, and it's finally, saying, look, this is important to surveying. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a really good thing. And obviously, it's very good for governance and compliance. I do think, though, we are in a stage now where, while surveyors are adopting, using it, starting to take interest in AI, everybody's at different stages. And I think the challenge will be with surveyors trying to understand the standard and apply it to their firms, because so many don't understand AI. Some are using it. Some are using it to different degrees. Some are adopting their whole business processes around it. But I think there are challenges around, for example, in the standard, there is reference to material impact. So where they have to disclose to a client where they're using AI that has a material impact. Now, there are some sort of broad sort of frameworks as to what that is, but I think it's open to a lot of interpretation, because people will be surveyors use AI in different forms. So, for example, Grammarly software used for editing grammar in reports has AI in it. Is that AI? It is AI, but do you disclose that? And at what point is that to be disclosed? I think that, for me, ambiguity, misunderstanding around it is going to be one of those things that could be a challenge, and maybe a compliance burden as well for especially the smaller firms.
Yeah, for documenting that. And it's interesting you mentioned, there are people out there who are already building their processes around it. And in the standards, obviously, it states you have to not only disclose it, but give the option, or customer the option, for you not to use AI, right? Which is, I imagine, going to be a challenge for some who have embraced it with open arms.
It's almost like saying it's a bad thing, and we're leaving it to the client to determine. It's a form of technology, and that we're almost giving that. I personally don't agree with that element of it, because I think that's the business, how the firm is run. I think there are guardrails, policies that need to be written, full transparency. But for me, I'm not so sure how that's going to be adopted.
It's interesting you mentioned people not knowing how to think about AI and approach AI. I think one of the things standards is good for, it's highlighting the key things that you should be thinking about, including disclosure to customers, including data security, which is obviously a big point of contention in the world of AI, and understanding how your data and potentially your customers' data, if you're putting that into models, is being used, and making sure that's secure. And then also the policies, procedures, governance, not leaving that down to your team, I think is really important. And being conscious as to when you're going to use it as a firm. There are times to use it, there are times not. And there's processes, particularly around QA, which we'll come on to when it is appropriate to use it. But being intentional, being conscious, being prescriptive to your firm, I think is a message that comes through. I think it's important.
Yeah.
People need to start.
It does. And when you think about, it's also around the level of auditing or checking or reviews that you do with your, say like a software provider or a product that you use, making sure that you understand what they are doing with the data, what's the security standards within that. And I think sometimes a lot will take it for granted. Oh, that's secure. We all know that some surveyors are using ChatGPT, with their reports. And it's like, but it doesn't have the security levels. Are they using the enterprise level? And these kind of things are a big risk.
Absolutely. I think that the final thing that comes across, and this should have been given, right? I don't think this necessarily needed to be stated, but ultimately the surveyor is responsible for the advice they're giving, right? And professional judgment cannot be replaced by AI, nor should it be at any point in the process. There has to be that surveyor's professional judgment overlaid and integrated with the output for the customer.
Absolutely. It's a tool, it's an enabler. Everyone talks about being augmented. You work with it, but it doesn't have the final say. It doesn't have the nuance, or the full context. It doesn't have the wisdom. AI doesn't have wisdom, doesn't have that years of experience. And it will always come down to the surveyor at the end of the day. And they're responsible for providing their opinion and their report.
Yeah.
And AI is the tool that can help them get to it faster. It can give more data, but at the end of the day, that data still needs to be interpreted and recommendation and advice given.
And absolutely provided. I think that word context and understanding the situation and understanding what's trying to be achieved or the customer is hoping for from the job that you're doing is really critical. Before we I suppose, it led us down a route of talking about some of the potential challenges with AI. Before we jump onto that, let's talk about how you've seen AI be used in today. So let's situate it in terms of people using AI effectively in the market at the moment, but then also kind of talk about the potential in the future. Where would you like to start in terms of where you've seen it used really effective?
I've seen it so many different areas. I think if we're looking at areas such as residential surveying, I think one of the most common areas that it is being used for is within report writing. It's one of the least favourite aspects of being a residential surveyor, because they want to be out and about looking, doing what they do, identify the defects, follow the trail. And the report writing can be the most challenging time, and it's very time consuming as well. And I think I've seen where the surveyors are using it to critique their own reports. So they're using it to audit their own reports, which I think is a really good idea. Obviously, you've got to be careful what you're putting into the models that you're particularly using. And they can, get feedback. They can feed in standards, RICS standards and things, and they can say, look, how am I doing? What's the quality of this? From different perspectives, even from a client's perspective, but also the report writing itself. So they're putting in a rough draft and then using it. But everyone's using it at different stages, and they're all using different models. And the concern is obviously the security. Other areas which I've seen an increase considerably in is computer vision. So you've got your tech, you've got drones. Drones have been out a number of years now, and it's kind of well adopted across surveying, although it took a long time to come through, like most tech with surveying. And now we've got the computer vision. So we're taking, literally capturing a roof, for example, thousands of data points and images. And now what the AI has been used for increasingly is to be able to interpret that data and identify actual defects. Because one thing I think that it's always said is like, well, AI can't understand a building like me. I've got this experience. I know what I'm looking for. But like with anything, AI doesn't get tired. It doesn't get hungry. It doesn't have bad eyesight. And if it's trained right, when you've got thousands of data points, you've got imagery, it can and it will spot things that potentially a surveyor won't see.
Yeah.
but it's not to be relied on. And I think that's what's happening. So it's great. And I think it's been used to sort of look at things and say, okay, the surveyor already has views on what that roof's defects are, for example. But then you use the data as well. And the AI is going, well, actually, there's this. It can find things that you haven't identified, but it can also be used up front for predictive things. So we've got data over a period of time. It can capture that data and it can look at, well, has that roof deteriorated over the last 5 years? I think things are like that, like maintenance, for like housing condition stock and things like that. You've got this leaking gutter. Well, we predict this is going to happen. So it's a proactive solution. It's been used for that as well.
Yeah.
So there's many areas, but
being used across the board, right? And it's interesting if I take you back to the kind of report writing side of things. I think you're absolutely spot on in terms of people using it more to analyze their own reports and prepare their own reports. That's the way we're looking at it from a Go report perspective. Because completely honestly, we've had customers, both commercial and residential, actually coming back to them and saying, and I'll come on to why they realise actually that they're putting through ChatGPT, but putting their reports into some kind of AI model and saying, interpret this for me, understand some of the frailties or inconsistencies, and come back with questions that you might want to ask as a follow-on. So the surveyor getting ahead of that is absolutely critical. The surveyor being able to go in a secure model, and you touched on it, right? I think it's really important that people are cautious about where they end up putting particularly data that might be sensitive to a specific customer. But it's important they get ahead of that and they understand how the customer might be viewing their reports when they hand them to.
Yeah, and I think it's really powerful because what you can do is one of the big challenges can be with the style of the report, and there's very much some reports are just 500 pages long, loads of text, and people aren't reading it. And I think there are clients that are putting reports into like a ChatGPT, for example, because they want a summary. But why not do that beforehand?
It's a really interesting one when you mentioned that, because it's a conversation I've had with a number of surveyors who understandably don't feel like they can even acknowledge that people are doing that, right? Because from their professional perspective, they want to make sure that everything they convey is articulated fully, and they want to envisage a world in which a customer is reading it from start to finish, even though they know that's realistically not the case in a number of instances. But yeah, it's an interesting moral dilemma for a surveyor, I suppose, to get to kind of always succumb to that pressure of, look, people can do that and will do that, and actually it's better to get ahead of it, better to control it, better to understand what they're seeing, and perhaps build in some kind of compromise that means that they don't jump straight to ChatGPT and go, give me a 2-sentence overview of what I need to know from this report, and start to, I suppose, bend towards those trends a little bit. It's not something that I've heard people come up with a conclusion for, but it's an interesting trend.
It is difficult because it's not about undermining the profession or the expertise, but as we know, we're in a world where we are just bombarded with information. Everyone's time poor, literally overload of information everywhere you are online, everything. And I think people just want quick, like, what does this mean to me very fast? Whereas you do want the comprehensive information behind it. But it's how do you then sort of repurpose a report in a way that then, should the client wish to want a summary, they could have it. But it's just, I think it's tailoring it. I think it's becoming customization and personalization to the particular client could be an amazing thing, I think.
Yeah. I think also kind of larger, I suppose, more data rich, when I say data rich, I mean data points as opposed to the kind of pros that you would get in a residential survey. There's an interesting world in which AI can start to generate insights for you that you wouldn't have necessarily seen before unless you were specifically looking for them, right? You've got condition surveys with thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of data points. To be able to apply something that can take structured or unstructured data and then turn that into insights is something we're really excited about, but something that could be hugely powerful for customers as well, particularly if they are given the option to interrogate that data. If they have specific questions that they want to ask and they want
to be able to ask a question.
It's a really exciting world.
A good example of that that I've seen, I've been speaking with company, it's called Legalito. So they're in conveyancing, and they literally are building whereby they have, for example, someone has a question with their conveyancer about the lease or there's something. And one of the examples was, can I keep a parrot in this flat? And it was a very random thing. And literally, so instead of getting in touch with the conveyancer and then maybe them having to review the file and get back to you, they can literally get access to a dashboard and they will ask that question as the client. They don't need to even, and this is an amazing technology, and it's AI based, and it's a good example of how the ability to interrogate and provide a better client experience.
Yeah. How do you think that marries? And again, I don't have an answer to this. How do you think that marries with the surveyors, the important element of surveyors providing information in such a way that one is factually correct and two gives the right advice to the customer? How do you think surveyors will react to or embrace the notion that something else will interpret and ultimately provide information through a lens that they don't actually have a lot of control over? I
think it comes down to the control. So I think there needs to be in the future where clients are going to put their reports into these models, whether you like it or not. So why are they doing that in the first place? Well, they want answers to things. If they have an option whereby you've provided this report and they can actually question that report and just that report, so it doesn't go out. It's not like a ChatGPT where there's no guidelines it's going to go out to the world, and they can get answers. It's still from their qualified opinion and expert opinion. If they're using a particular tool controlled through the surveyor, I don't know how these interactive reports could work, but if they're asking me it's only on that report, then that is their expertise. It's just an ability for them to ask a question rather than maybe have to send an email or pick up the phone. There'd be certain things they could ask. And the surveyor could even ask that within. I don't know. I'm just thinking, future things that could be really helpful. I understand where you're going from with the expertise, because I think there is a threat, because it's not replacing the expertise and the insight and the context and the years of experience knowing a particular local region, for example.
I don't think that's ever going to be replaced. It's specifically, it's almost as we talked about it earlier, right? Easily accessing sections of the report. They feel like they need to be able to interrogate quickly. And as you said, I think it's really important that those models are only then pointed at that specific report, and they're able to just navigate it in a way that we've become accustomed to, right? Asking specific questions. I think from a tech perspective, the provenance of the section of the report is really important as well, to be able to give it an answer and say that's been pulled from this section. Jump to that section really quickly so you can see the full context will be really important. But it's an exciting avenue as well.
A very quick interlude. Do you love surveying buildings and advising your customer but dread the write-up? Have you ever thought there must be a better way to produce your reports? And chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have. And the good news is you're not alone. We work at Go Report with thousands of surveyors up and down the country to completely transform the way they produce reports. With Go Report, you capture everything on site straight into a smart template. And when you get back to the office, you're instantly able to generate a customer-ready professional report. No double entry and no time wasted on admin. If that sounds like an upgrade your workflow needs, then scan the QR code or click the link in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation.
We talked about kind of the report writing side of things. I think one really interesting conversation actually I had with James Brooke was around his ambition for AI and how he wants his team to use it, enabling his team to provide a better, more human service as well. And that's something that's quite often missed, right? You talked about people not enjoying the notion of spending lots of time writing up reports. Typically what surveyors want to be doing is being out on the road or speaking to customers and advising customers. There is an enormous upside, which means that you can provide more of a human connection, I suppose, and more feedback to your customer if you save time, not fettling with reports and changing grammar and changing spelling here and there.
Because at the end of the day, that's probably one of the most disliked part of the job. I think for a lot of surveyors is the report writing, and like you said, you free up time. You can, like you say, you have the more time for the calls or having a better customer experience, client experience and interaction. It frees up time to do other things. I guess the only thing is, and a lot of things that I read across AI generally and businesses, is that the idea is that it frees up time, but then you end up doing other things that won't necessarily free up your time. You want to do more. So some surveys, for example, may want to do more surveys. Some can improve that client experience, but I think it also opens up the doors for lots of other things. Better work-life balance. There are different things you can do with that, I think.
Yeah.
But it's important that, having learnt early days, a few years back, using AI, getting crazy with trying so many tools, it took more of my time than anything else. And I had to okay, you can get carried away with it. So I'd say that's something to be aware of with AI generally.
I think, again, talking from a kind of service provider perspective, that's where I see our job to kind of distill that, because we talked about it before we jumped on, actually. AI has been around for a long time. People haven't necessarily understood it. And quite often people say AI will be able to do that, and it'll be able to do it really comprehensively. There's almost two traps that have fallen into there. One is people just talk about AI, the answer to everything, and doesn't really specialize in anything specific or surveyors and solve specific problems for them. And two, if it doesn't get them far enough along that journey, then it can be time consuming in and of itself, right? If it does 50% of the job, but then you have to spend another 10, 15 minutes then messing around with it and changing it and everything else, you may as well have written it from scratch or whatever the alternative was. So I think from a tech provider perspective, what we're focusing on is looking at specific use cases and making sure we make them good enough so that they are usable and they are useful for surveyors. Because AI can do so much, and we kind of touched on the range of different things it can do. We'll continue to talk about it, but I think it's really important now that people are focused on how can we make something really useful for surveyors in our industry. And also, like, from a rate of development, I know it's been around for a long time, but certainly in modern times, people will have seen the acceleration and the speed with which it's developing is incredible. So I think a key takeaway from this, from my perspective, is, if you saw an AI solution, I'm not going to say yesterday, but certainly if you saw it 6 months ago, it will have materially moved on. And people saying it's not good enough, it couldn't do this. The rate of change from our side with the models that we're developing as well, thanks to the platforms they're on, is just it's so impressive how quickly it's moving forward.
It is. They're releasing something every week, all the models, and they're all racing against each other to get to the forefront of it. And so you'll see something like video generation. I remember something on LinkedIn, and that was a year ago. And, everyone was jumping on it saying, no, it's rubbish, this kind of thing. And then literally, when you look at video generation this year, like with the recent release of Sora from OpenAI, it's just incredible. You can almost not distinguish between what is real and what isn't, what's AI generated video now. And I think it feeds into surveying, and the tech and the sophistication of these models is just going to increase. It'll just get better. But I think it's difficult. I think surveyors and everybody, and myself, I struggle to keep up with it. I read, follow, scientists, papers, podcasts all the time because I'm personally very interested in it. And I just, there's just so much. You think you know something, and something else will come out. So from your perspective and Go Report, it's tough. And any kind of software business, you've got to keep up with it because they bring out something else and something else. It's like, oh, right.
Enormously exciting from our side, because it means that we have to really stay cutting edge and think about how we're developing the future. But you're right, it's difficult at the same time because the latest thing springs up, and the latest iteration of a model might change the way that we think about the way we develop features. So it's a really exciting, fast-paced world. And again, I think a takeaway from my side, and we'll come back, we'll circle back to this, but is if you haven't already, you've got to engage with it, because it is going to have a fundamental impact on our industry, whether you think it's a force for good or not. You need to be aware of it. You need to be consciously making decisions to use it or not use it. It's not certainly slowing down. And
if you don't use it, your clients are. But there's other things that, I was saying early this year, last year, which is around how AI is affecting, like, a surveying firm business from different areas. So the way that surveying firms are getting found. So, typically everything was through Google. And now Google have released their own AI summaries in Google search results. So they're not answering questions like, do I need a level 2 survey, and go into your website. Google's providing an answer there. So search and discoverability for surveying firms has been impacted, and that is just going to increase. People are now using their AI tools like a ChatGPT or a Gemini, Perplexity, to say, I need a survey here, find some surveyors. So it affects around the business. and your clients and everything else externally. So even if you choose, you don't like it or don't want to adopt it, you still need to understand it and have policies in place, because your clients will ask, you need to be found, discoverable, all these kind of things are impacting because it's become pervasive in everything we are doing in society. AI is just gradually coming out in everything, all our devices, our software, whether we want it or not, like WhatsApp and, things like that.
You touched on also that, and I think it is worth viewing them almost separately. There's the write-up and the natural language side of things, and then there's the computer vision side of things, which obviously is going to have an impact on surveying, particularly as we talked about the models getting better and better, image recognition, item recognition, issue recognition being that much greater. How do you see surveyors using that today? And how do you see that kind of evolving in the, I think, what in my mind is relatively short-term future?
I think in the main, from my understanding and talking with others in this space, I think computer vision is not fully there yet, as in we can, I think around the other areas of AI, such as text, they're way ahead with the language models. But a computer vision, I don't think we are fully yet at the stage where you can literally take all these views, a video of a house, and it'll identify all the defects. I don't think we're there quite yet. However, it's improving all the time, and it's all based upon the data that it's trained upon as well. So how would it know how to interpret, is that damp or not? Because there's loads of data points it needs and comparisons and training data. So I've seen some surveyors talk about it. I've seen some software solutions pop up, which I think one of them was for people that are wanting to basically do their own little mini survey on a house. I can't remember the name of the software, but it's very basic. And I worry because these kind of solutions that have come out, who has the liability in that? If someone does their own survey or walks around the property they want to buy, what happens with so they found out about the issues, but there's no protection there. There's no liability for expertise. And I think that's the big thing where you'll have to have surveyors involved. Future-wise, I think these things will evolve. I think they will become better. I think there will become some big players potentially that will evolve, because if you can provide something that helps a surveyor, as opposed to, so they can use it as another area. It's like an extra sort of extension of, you've got your photographs, but if you're using also video, and then you take that data back and you've got your own observations, you use it as the tool to assist you then to report something even better. I think there's still challenges with the data, but I'm not very technical, but that's my understanding. It's not there yet.
I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of it needs to be paired with an expert, right? It again comes back to that professional judgment. I think there's an enormous amount of value in terms of the low-hanging fruit, right, in terms of identifying what things are, and perhaps if it's in a great condition, combining a photo of a roof with a voiceover from a surveyor or some notes from surveying saying, actually, look, I've looked it over, it's all fine. Just describe the roof and describe the characteristics of that type of roof and how long it might last and all that kind of thing. Then that's enormously powerful. I don't think, as you said, it's in a position where, particularly using video, and kind of an unstructured scan of a house, it will be able to zoom in on everything and go, yeah, here's the defect. And also there's always, no matter how good it gets, going to be I need to further investigate. I need to move this. I need to go into this in a little bit more detail. I need to test this with a damp meter, whatever it may be. The surveyor is always going to be required to do that. I think we're at a stage, or starting to be at a stage now, where it can complement the surveyor and, again, hopefully aim to take some of that laborious work away, which is just naming, when something is in a good condition and there isn't any additional value or additional context that's required from the surveyor, just getting that done quickly so they can focus on the things that matter. It
comes back to the things that AI can't do. And think about your senses. So the AI, maybe one day, but it's not going to hear necessarily the creaky floorboard. It's not going to know that, looking at a room, oh, hang on, that wardrobe looks like it's been moved to cover a damp patch in a corner, because you've sensed from the vendor something, something they've said, this kind of thing. You can just tell by looking around the room. And it's not going to smell that paint or that damp paint that someone's used to try and paint over a damp patch. which visually might look okay, but you can smell the fresh paint in a room. You're like, why is this being recently done? It's all these kind of sensors and things that I think where unless all the data and everything is in an AI model, it can't be fully relied on. It's that nuance, it's that context, it's senses when you think, oh, someone's been really evasive or avoidance, they're trying to hide things, or someone said something about next door neighbor. There's all these things that it won't know.
It's an interesting one. So I completely agree with you on the residential side of things. I think it's, and for what it's worth, at Go Report, we've been thinking about it as, that critical friend, that assistant to the surveyor. You mentioned it earlier. I think it has a role to play in the residential space to almost QA reports and get it to a point where it starts to nudge the surveyor, say, look, have you thought about this? And I've noticed this. And it might be wrong, but just having that second opinion is quite useful. I think in the commercial world, interestingly, when it comes to things like simple asset capture surveys and also to a degree simple condition surveys, that's where the population of data, I think the technology is there now, particularly with a bit of training for those with data to kind of compare it to. I think that's where there is an exciting option, again, to remove that kind of laborious administrative task of going, right, I need to just I need to basically type in or tap a load of buttons to just say, this is a monitor. That's where AI has enormous potential to enable surveyors to, again, free up their time to talk about the condition of things that really matter to their customers. I think we touched on it in various guises, that the big opportunities around QA and kind of making sure that you're providing a better quality product to your customer. You talked about people having a bad day or missing things. QA, AI never having a day off. The ability for it to proofread, check, challenge is enormously powerful and should only be a force for good in the industry, because if the surveyor uses their professional judgment and says, look, I don't need to change, or I don't need to acknowledge that challenge because I know that what I've put there is right, then they can sift through the feedback and only cherry pick the ones that they think will make it more accurate or better for the customer.
I think it's an exceptional opportunity. One of the things I always astounded me coming into surveying many years ago was, background wise, early careers, I was an auditor. And so I was like, well, how do the quality of reports get checked? Is anyone auditing them? And they're not regularly audited, really, unless certain firms have procedures set up in their practice. And so for me, and I can understand there's costs and implications of it, but if you can literally have a tool that's going to audit against compliance, for example, your standards, it can sense check against things like your building regulations, all these things it can do, it's like an assistant to you. It can go, right, well, you didn't see that, you didn't spot that, or you spotted that, maybe that particular defect. Have you reported on that in the risk section? What are the implications? Does that? And it would be able to link things together, and it can do that in a matter of seconds. Whereas it's not saying that it will replace the surveyor, but that whole thought process, and you'll still need reflective thought and all of that. But it is literally just going to help to give that sense check. And in a comfortable way, why not have something? And it can tell you if there's something before it goes out where you maybe need to put that in. Why would it, to give an even better report?
You mentioned it there. That's the thing that has resonated with the features we're building the most is, I referenced that it would appear in the risk section, or I said that, highlighted the risk and then forgot to drop it into that section later. Just simple things that people might forget that not undermine the quality of the report, because fundamentally they don't. Just little things that you can easily pick up with things like proofreading tools make a big difference. So we talked a lot about the positive side of AI, and that's also they talked about its drawbacks as we've been having the conversation. What do you think the main blockers are for AI in surveying, and what do you think the things people should be cautious of when they do start to think about adopting their own AI models?
Stepping back a bit, I think with regard to that whole question, I think we're in a profession that, and it comes with the role, is surveyors are very skeptical and they've got a questioning mindset, very diverse. And I've seen this over the years, having seen how drone technology was received about 6-7 years ago, and how it took so much time to realize that this was a tool and it wasn't here to replace. And so there's a lot of protectionism around the role. And I think that with regards to things like a simple thing like not using having an iPad instead of a clipboard out on site. And I've seen these debates play out for years now. And I think so. One of the difficulties, I think, of one of the considerations with AI in surveying is that you're up against something already in the sense of it's a profession that's very resistant to change and new tech, and anything that can threaten the role itself is seen as a threat to the person, their profession, expertise. And I think that needs to be won over. And I think gradually that's happening when, for example, you've got the RICS standard that helps realise this is important.
Legitimize it, right? Yeah.
And I think it's keeping an open mind. And I think it's understanding a lot of what I see and the commentary I've heard is because of misunderstanding or a lack of knowledge around AI. And if someone mentions it to you down the pub, for example, and they have an opinion, but it's like you need to understand it and try and learn it yourself, but factual. Don't just rely on social media. Literally read about it, learn about it, read the standard, and come from it from a factual point of view and a questioning point of view, because I think we need to encourage surveyors to start to understand it more. And then as they understand it, there's less fear. I've been in situations where I've spoken to surveyors and not realizing I'm all enthusiastic about what it can do. And then I'll literally within half an hour, they're all saying, this is really scary. And there's so much fear. There's so much fear about AI at the moment because it's everywhere. The media, it's affecting not just the surveying profession, it's affecting the legal profession. It's definitely affecting the accountancy profession. And so they see it's a threat. So there's straight away.
It's interesting you mentioned the legal profession that we touched on earlier. From my experience, certainly the people that I know that are operating in the tech space in the legal profession, there has been wider acceptance of AI, and I think people have adopted it more willingly in that space. In a space, obviously, where it's very important you get your words right. You make sure that what you're handing to your customer is absolutely spot on. Why do you think that is versus surveyors? Do you think it is that skepticism that prevents surveyors from jumping into things two-footed?
I think some of it's that, but then I'm wondering, I see a lot more happening within the legal space as both professionals in legal, online, for example, in social media, talking about AI. There seems to be a lot more vocal voices in legal, financial, as opposed to surveying on a social media side of things, like a LinkedIn. And I think that does affect how people perceive something.
Yeah.
So surveying's always, when you look within the surveying profession, there aren't a lot of vocal people out there talking about it and talking about AI. And so if you don't, and it's the same across many subjects, just surveyors are very reluctant to be on social media. That is like without a doubt, and I'm always encouraging it, but there is a big reluctance. So I think in general, a lot of people go to social media to learn and understand what's happening. And if surveyors aren't talking about it or talking about it in a positive light, it won't be.
Often it's
financial. They are. You have big voices that are like saying you need to listen to this. There's a lot of effort behind it to say, don't be scared about this. But in surveying, I think it's quite quieter. I don't know if that's really one of the reasons, but it's what I've seen.
It's an interesting one. And I think the legal space serves as what can be achieved and how people can embrace it in what is a very tightly controlled space. So yeah, it's an interesting one to watch as a comparison, I suppose. I think one of the other reasons that perhaps people haven't adopted it is you kind of referenced it. It's the conversation down the pub, right? And it's I typed this into ChatGPT and it came back with something nonsensical type conversation where I think, again, from my perspective, people aren't using the tools, or the tools aren't specific enough to the world of surveying to be of use. So really kind of honing in on what it is that how it's going to benefit the surveyor specifically, building tools that are specific to surveyors. It's really critical, because if you don't put the right prompts in and it's not, for whatever reason, configured in the right way, it can sometimes either hallucinate, which is really dangerous, obviously, in the surveying space, or it can come up with a slightly incorrect answer.
I think that's a common challenge, because ChatGPT came out to the world, the first one, November 2022, with this amazing technology. free to the world, as long as you had your device access to it as it was rolled out. But there was no training manual. And so we've been given something so powerful, and everyone's just had to fend for themselves to find out, to work out what it means. And where do you go to for this? And one of the things I really want to help tackle, and that's one of the reasons why in the communities we'll have an AI in tech group, discussion group, is to facilitate these conversations. Because I think, where do you go to learn what it means for surveying? And also, where the training, I do understand there is some training through the RICS, but I think we need more of that. I think we need more training relevant to different types of surveying. I think we need more people to talk about it. And that's what I want to help facilitate. But training and understanding, and this is very typical across all the professions, is lacking, is way behind adoption. Way behind.
Yeah.
So people have just try to work it out themselves, but we need more structured training and what does this actually mean? And what is happening out there? And what are people's experiences? And I think the training and support around it is a big issue, and it's part of the problem.
I completely agree. I think we come across two types of people: some who are using AI perhaps slightly incorrectly and are skeptical as a result, and some who are just blissfully unaware of its capabilities. And as soon as you so what have you thought about doing this, and have you thought about this feature, then they go, oh wow, that's incredible, that was saving them incredible amount of time. So yeah, that understanding piece is really important. On the understanding, I suppose, turning the lens to specifically surveying and technical expertise, I see AI as both an exciting opportunity, but also genuinely quite a concern to a degree for young surveyors coming through. I think the education system more broadly is undergoing a revolution. My partner's actually a lecturer, and she's going through her own troubles with people writing essays with AI without even thinking about it, and all that kind of thing. On the one hand, there's that, and I think that is a real concern, and that's something that RICS have to think very carefully about, and obviously educational institutions have to think about. But hopefully there is also an opportunity in terms of, we touched on it earlier, easy access to information and being able to ask specific questions and get credible answers, and not be aware that standards are out there and exist, or just not be able to find them at the right time. It's it'll be interesting to see how that side of things plays out.
I have big concerns, and one of them is around education. And you look at how this is playing out globally, and you have universities, some of them already in the US, who are ahead in AI adoption. And even last year they were literally rolling it out. So all the subjects at one particular university, I can't remember which one it was going to be AI adopted. So that, because I think that's the big concern, is our big education systems are having to understand and deal with having these devices. But the point is, I think the way we learn is impacting how we learn. I think if you rely on them, that's the big danger, cognitive decline, relying on these tools. And that's something I do warn against. But I think also, like you say, the opportunities coming through for new surveyors is how it's going to impact their roles. Because, for example, going back to legal, we know for a fact there are the stats that are coming out now where there is a threat to entry-level legal assistants because they're just being replaced with AI. And so that whole generational, where you learn, you go to university, you come out, you get some experience on the job, and then what the worry is, and this is, I haven't really delved into this in surveying, I don't know if you have, but how it's going to impact younger trainee surveyors, because they need the
huge impact. Again, shining a lens on the commercial world, typically there is a hierarchy in which younger or more junior surveyors are going out and doing the data collection, and in doing so they're familiarizing themselves with the typical issues you face, spotting defects, all that kind of thing. If you can do that much more quickly, this is in direct contradiction to I suppose what Go Report tries to facilitate, but there is something to be said for that repetition and that, I suppose, those slightly more mundane tasks in terms of building a bank of knowledge and building a bank of experience and having that lived experience to draw on, which it is a concern from an AI adoption perspective.
It's a big concern. Yeah, job loss and all these perceptions and the over-reliance on on AI. I think some people are just using it as we know, just to create content, and it's just flooding the internet now.
The flip side to that, I suppose, is people, as you said, who are in educational institutions will become AI natives, right? And they will get to a point where they don't expect to do simple jobs that could be automated using AI. And then there'll be a disparity in terms of expectation, I suppose, when it comes to junior surveyors. So there's a really tightrope to walk there, in terms of making sure that we don't do the younger surveyors a disservice.
I think the thing is, with something that's just been rolled out and is just adopted globally and extremely low cost, this tech, and how fast it's evolving, is that our particular institutions, our legal systems, our education systems, they are not set up to move, and they're slow. And this is the thing. So students are using it, clients are using it, everyone's using it, and yet all the guardrails, the controls, security, how policies, everything is not there, and it's so lagging behind. And when you look at the the RICS standard, ideally that needed to come out to me, a year or two earlier, because everyone was about it, getting really concerned, because that's just how long that standards take. That'll have to change. Those standards will have to be updated, because I think, as we know, it will change. By next year, it's going to be different again.
Updated, right? And absolutely. And it's not a problem that's unique to the RICS nor our industry. As you said, it's across the board. People trying to keep up. It's challenging in a world that's changing so quickly. On that note, I suppose final topic I wanted to cover was, how do you think the role of the surveyor is changing as a result of AI? And what skills do you think they might need to think about, I suppose, bolstering or learning or picking up as a result of the increased prevalence of AI?
I think with AI comes the ability to analyse and interpret significant amount of data. And I think you can have more and more data, but you'll still need that wisdom and that insight from the surveyor to interpret it. I think the AI will enable the surveyor to get access and assimilate a lot more information faster and get answers quicker. But I think the role of the surveyor will be understanding that power, because your reports are only as good as the data and your insights and your interpretation. But understanding data, analysis, capture, making sure what you're using is reliable. I think being able to relay to your client, the public, about your understanding of AI. They need to understand it, because people are using it and people will ask questions, and this will just increase. How you get it across, even on your own website, how you're going to basically position yourselves in an AI world where it will be, a lot of people. There was one particular thing I'll mention. There was, I don't know the surveyor's name, but there was a surveyor who basically said their business model in residential would be focused on serving those clients who don't like AI. And I thought that's an interesting one, because that's
interesting niche.
Because long term that won't last. It's like when the internet came out, everybody thought it was evil, and it was, and some people thought it was, all the typical things, all the things that were said about the internet, people say about AI. And I think so surveyors will need to become much more aware of how it will impact them from not just a business perspective reporting, but also societal, because it will affect lots of other things around them, and how then you adapt to that. So I think keeping up to date, I think more of the human element. So everything I learn about at the moment, reading, everything's human first. Everything you see now, we keep saying human this, human that. We never used to say that, because there was never another intelligence. Strange, because it's just become a thing, human first, everywhere. And I think anything where you are giving that value and that interpretation, go on, carry on.
Yeah. No, sorry to jump in, but it's interesting. I think because we're receiving more data and more information than ever, I think that emphasis on human interaction and someone digesting it for you and putting it into your context has become that much more valuable in a world in which, the report or the data that you got out of the survey used to be the kind of end goal. Now that can be done more quickly and more efficiently, or in greater detail, it becomes more important that the surveyor is able to convey the important bits and help them understand the report.
I think the conveying bit, I think the conveying bit, and things like I've talked to some surveyors who say how important one number one things in surveying is communication and how you communicate with clients, and that can be done obviously through reports. But I think using AI to free up certain things so you can focus on having the conversations, getting more on the phone, because I think people more and more, there will be a shift to where people will want genuine conversations, not AI chatbots, not AI assistants, and empathy and all those qualities of understanding what does it mean for them, that the output of that report, what does it mean to that home buyer? What actually does it mean in their world? And being able to be being more of a storyteller, I think there's something to be said about that, and meeting people where they are. But that's not necessarily an AI specific skill, but I think it would become more important, the person.
Yeah, absolutely. As AI becomes more prevalent, certainly. I'm going to be very unfair and ask you to almost summarize the conversation. If there are kind of 3 key takeaways that you would ask people to take from our conversation and the increasing prevalence of AI, what are the key kind of bits of advice you would give them?
I think first and foremost is to keep an open mind and look at AI. It can be scary. People are worried that it's going to replace their jobs. I don't think in surveying that will be the case. I think things are going to change. But I think keep an open mind, and healthy skepticism is fine, but don't bury your head in the sand with this, because it's impacting everything, whether you like it or not. And if you want to stay ahead, you need to keep up to date. So the other thing is, learn and read about it, but don't just read what you see on social media. Follow experts, follow scientists, follow experts through the RSES, for example. But with anything, understand that it's a lot of things that are happening now is because of fear. It's because of an unknown. The more you understand AI, the less you fear it. I don't fear it because I learned so much about it. But when I first read that book, I was 3.5 years ago, it was a moment. You can even still imagine me sat out in the garden thinking, something really bad is coming. Yeah. And then I learned and I read. I was like, but then when other people started to notice, this fear comes in. I think be very questioning when you are looking to adopt anything for your business with AI. So, look at the credentials, look at the security standards, the controls around it. Because AI is being stamped on everything. I was at a PropTech event last year and I couldn't believe how many stands AI this, AI that, but actually use it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
how useful is it, I suppose.
How useful is it? And really, what is that AI? And if you understand what AI is and what it's capable of, then you're more informed when you're making decisions, such as software, such as like Go Report. Because if people understand it, there's less fear, and then you know where you are. I think people are coming from a position of maybe not understanding. And, there's many things I could say, but I think learn, read about it, but follow experts and question it. And don't just take verbatim what it says. That when surveyors are using it for their own purposes, like the ChatGPTs, don't rely on it, but use it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this edition of the podcast. It was a really interesting conversation. Appreciate it a lot.
If you enjoyed today's episode or it gave you some food for thought, be sure to follow our show on your preferred podcast platform. To learn more about what we do at Go Report, visit goreport.com. The links are also in the bio. Until next time.